All right, Sam, and we're back with part two. So if you watched part one, thanks so much for watching that. Wow, we could have gone on forever, I think. Definitely a lot to say about that. I felt like I had to cut us off given what we said at the first part of that episode, but I think we'll be revisiting that topic a lot. There's a lot to say.
I think so. Yeah.
So we're going to launch into a couple news stories from this week. The first one I want to get to actually was sent to us by a friend. So Justin, this one's for you, bud. We will, and actually, I think this is an appropriate segue based on what we just talked about with George Floyd. So here is the article. The headline is Kansas State football players announce boycott after student's Floyd tweet. So it seems like what happened here, there was a student who attends Kansas State, and he sent out a tweet that said, and before I get to this is disgusting. I'm sorry, but these are not my words, but I do think it's important to see what he actually said, so that we can react to it appropriate. So excuse me for having to say this. It says, "Congratulations to George Floyd on being drug free for an entire month." So that was a student, Jaden McNeil, from Kansas State. Apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Sammy, on any of these facts, but it seems like after this happened, basically the whole football team, the whole Wildcat football team, has sort of banded together to boycott football, saying they are not going to play football until this student or is dismissed, or until the university revises their policy around dismissing students and then dismisses them. Do you know?
From what I gathered, and again, I just read this. I had heard something about this. I read this article today before we chatted about it. From what I've gathered is that they want the student to be expelled from the school. I think with that also, they are looking for it to have some changes to the overall policy of something like that. So I guess you could say what comes first, chicken or the egg in this process, but I think they want both. It is it's kind of this continuation a little bit. And I know this is going to have the springboard for it, but it's, you've been seeing this a lot in, actually a lot in college sports recently, mainly with football, but in general, that it's, these young athletes are starting to use their, are utilizing their platforms again, the positives, and the double-edged sword that is social media. They're using their platforms to kind of get this word out, get this voice out that these kind of things aren't acceptable. They're understanding their power that comes with the economics of college football in particular, college sports in general, but college football in particular. And it does open up this little bit, which I'm sure the main point we're gonna get into here is a little bit of this Pandora's box about, I don't know if you'd say this is censoring, because there's not censoring. They're not saying he needs to remove it. They're saying his actions deserve consequences. And, this gets into everyone's favorite conversation about what the First Amendment actually means. But it's interesting. And I think this is going to be something that comes on a lot more. We've been seeing a lot of kind of intention. I mean, we can go into details on this, but that this gentleman seems like he has a failing organization, that a club on campus that's not even considered a justifiable club, I think the statement was, because they didn't have enough members. So it's not an official club on campus. But
America First Students, apparently.
America First Students. So it's definitely this is a person that supposedly, according to this article, has had issues in the past. So this is obviously a person who's looking to just stir the pot for, notoriety, I guess. So, all publicity is good publicity, even bad publicity. I don't know. But it's going to be very, very interesting. College campuses, as we talked about in the first part about, a little bit having to do with the Brett Weinstein. It's just like about what actions on college campuses in particular, but like what counts as free speech, what counts as acceptable expressions of speech, especially when it encroaches upon other people's quote unquote rights.
Right.
It's very, very interesting. I will be very interested to see where this goes. I'll let you talk about it, but obviously we can talk about, the Chuba, oh gosh, I always pronounce his name wrong. The running back from Oklahoma State, who had a similar thing recently with the coach of Oklahoma State, Mike Gundy, wearing an OAN shirt, and which is OAN is a highly, highly, highly firebrand right wing political news outlet. A recent favorite of Trump's. I'm not sure if you saw that, Zach.
I haven't seen that, no.
To kind of tie it in, he's a Heisman hopeful. I'm blanking on his name right now. It's Chuba. Gosh, I'm sorry.
I'll look it up. Keep talking. I'll look it up.
Our buddy Dave here. But he kind of said, I'm not going to play for this team until our coach apologizes, because what this shirt represents in this time, it's OAN is the type of news resource that kind of would state that, what we were talking about, most news sources don't, which you say you don't follow, but like would be the type who would focus on George Floyd's the skeleton in George Floyd's closets to try to justify the news.
Gotcha.
Type of organization.
Is it Chuba Howard?
Chuba Howard, yes. I thought it was Howard, but I didn't want to say it incorrectly. Yes.
Or sorry, Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard.
Chuba Hubbard. It's a little bit of a mouthful. I apologize. So it's this very interesting thing, because these athletes understand that football is the moneymaker, and they have this ability. They're unpaid. This opens up a lot of doors for down the line about them utilizing this power they have right now, and and then it's obviously going to open up the Pandora's box of whether or not that's always going to be used in a positive way or not. I'm a little bit torn on this one, not knowing the full details other than what's presented in this AP article. It's obviously posted today, so there's probably still some information still to come out. What the guy said is horrible. And as a public institution, though, it's going to be interesting to see how they respond to this. I think if it was a private institution, he would probably already been kicked out. But I think as a public institution, there's the extra tie-in of taxpayer funding and all this kind of stuff that comes with it, and how the decisions they make, how that impacts things going forward. I fully support their ability to sit out. I'd be interested to see if that actually happens. It's just one of the many little things that are kind of jumping off of this moment in time we're in right now, where it's again, all of this stuff from the George Floyd situation, the Black Lives Matter, et cetera, is coming out. I think young people are getting the opportunity to use their voice, and maybe not always in the way people maybe want them to, but perhaps it's a good thing. It's an exciting thing that more people are understanding the power of their words and what they can do, and see where it can go. I don't know. It's very, very interesting. I apologize. I've rambled a little long, which I'm good at.
Sorry,
so go for it.
I have a lot of mixed thoughts on this one. On one hand, I think what the student said is despicable. I think it's in very poor taste. Obviously, I do not agree with him. As I referenced in part one, something that I try to think about a lot is, what do my values mean, and how do I uphold them? It's easy to uphold your values when something comes along that you agree with that corresponds with that. It's quite a different story when you have to stand up for your values for somebody that you disagree with, and perhaps disgustingly disagree with, as in this case. That said, there's a number of angles here. Number one, you mentioned the free speech element. I'm not 100% sure how that comes into play here. The First Amendment specifies basically that you're protected from the government taking action against you for what you say. It doesn't mean that you're immune from consequences. Mm-hmm. While I would very much disagree with, a government Gestapo hunting this guy down and killing him, that's obviously too far. It's there to protect you from repercussions from the government at large for your speech. Okay, so with that out of the way, like you said, I think it's a public institution, right? So it is taxpayer funded. That does add another wrinkle here. Gosh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be. Well, let me say this: the thing that I most disagree with in this article is this right here. So it says Kansas State football players said they will boycott all team activities until administrators create a policy that will allow a student to be expelled for openly racist, threatening, or disrespectful actions. Mm-hmm. I really disagree with this. Disrespectful actions is highly open to interpretation. What is a disrespectful action? What if I tell you I don't like your striped shirt? Can I be dismissed from Kansas State?
In my eyes, yes, but no, but probably not.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't think you have a right to not be offended. First of all, in general.
Okay.
Obviously, I keep thinking I have to prefix everything I say with what this guy said is disgusting, but I feel compelled to say that. I don't know if him firing off a tweet should allow a group of people to basically boycott him out of the school. I'm not sure about that. I don't know that I don't know what the right answer is here. I'm very concerned about setting a precedent, specifically regarding disrespectful actions. But, more than that, I'm also concerned about, people always say, well, we live in a democracy. Well, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic. And the reason for that is because in a democracy, if there's 3 people in a room and 2 of them vote that they can kill the other one, that's democracy. And they've just killed the third person through a democratic process. I'm not interested in that. I think that's just as detestable as some of the authoritarian things we were discussing earlier. So just for the fact that they are getting together and protesting and boycotting, I don't think that in itself is enough to automatically warrant a change. But maybe I'm wrong. Another thought that I had here is, I think, a lot of people, I think, forget that part of the First Amendment, yes, it protects free speech. The words of that amendment also protect peaceful protest. And I think in some ways there's almost nothing more American you can do than peacefully protest. I think that's your right. I think that's certainly your right as a football player at Kansas State, if that's what you feel is correct and that's what you want to do. I'm wary of making demands based on a group of people getting together and saying, this is just how it is. I think it's interesting that they're doing it. My mind is open on this one to see what the right thing is. I don't know. I want to hear more opinions on this one. And I'll give you one more final thought, Sam. In the 80s, there was a group of air traffic controllers. I don't know if you're familiar with the story. Air traffic controllers, government employees that went on strike. Like the whole thing, in the entire nation, all went on strike so that you don't have any air traffic controllers. And their words basically to Ronald Reagan were, I think they were demanding a pay increase or something like that. And I might be mixing up the details there, but that the main points are right. And basically Ronald Reagan just said goodbye to all of them. And he not only did he fire every single one of them, he barred them for life from ever becoming an air traffic controller again, at least for the federal government. And there was a period of time there where they struggled to get by with, they brought in folks from the military who did this kind of thing, and they slowly brought the forces back up to it. I think it's definitely within your rights in that situation to go on strike, but it's also, you have to be willing to deal with maybe the repercussions of that strike. And so I'm not saying that they should, be dismissed from the team, but I think it's an interesting thing to consider about, what are you actually trying to accomplish here, and is setting this precedent that you can just band together and get rid of anybody you don't like, is that really what we want to do, especially in the case of our public universities?
Yeah, I mean, it's It's an interesting. It's interesting because I mean, this is something I kind of returned to you. Let's say that this was at a a private this is your job. Is that your job? Let's just say you sent this off. How would you feel your company would be justified in terminating you based upon something like that?
Would they be justified? Yes, they would. And that's not a matter of free speech because it's a private company. They can do whatever they want.
Exactly. So I think it's an interesting, and I think this is kind of what with universities right now, especially across the country. People are angry about the talk about whether it's safe space, about how, like you were saying, no one feels like they're allowed. They don't. I think the wording you said was, you don't have the right to not be offended. Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
Right? So that everybody has thin skin, and everybody wants to, whether it's safe spaces, and again, this is especially having to do with college campuses right now.
Yeah.
And wanting to, and whether that's censoring people or holding certain people accountable based upon their speech or their actions, more so than others. And I don't know. I mean, it's tough for me, something like this, because what is the purpose of, even as a public institution, what does it say going forward to say that you're okay with people? I don't know.
I think I see where you're going, but let me.
I'm missing the context on this a little bit. Sorry, one second. I just missed the context on this a little bit because I don't. The article doesn't state how did this become so well circulated? Was this just a simple, this guy's got 9 followers and then somebody saw it and it's been spread around? Did he post it? Did he attach it to somebody's link? I don't know these kind of things because it's. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. It is delicate, but it's...
Let me ask you this, Sam. How do you feel about, certainly when I went to, before I dropped out of college, which again is a different conversation, I attended James Madison University in Virginia, and I assume this was probably the norm at other college campuses, but there were routinely end of days type preachers on the college campus, yelling at people, telling them they're going to hell, things like that. Do you support that kind of speech on a college campus?
So that's a good example, because though it is typically, I would usually associate that and actually have personal experience with it as a person, a person I went to high school and with would be the person who they would erect the 3-story tall signs and pictures of dead fetuses and abortion stuff, and which is solely, and which again I think is a really good example in relation to this, is solely meant to instigate. I don't even. This is, which is it's an antithetical thing of what you and I are even trying to achieve in this kind of conversation. That is not about creating discourse. That is about antagonizing, and about shaming, and about other things like that. I'm trying to think of other adjectives and verbs to say what that's doing, but do I think that kind of person should be allowed to discuss that kind of thing there? Yes. But I also think that there's a difference between having a discussion, and there's a difference between intentionally skewed imagery or skewed wording. This young man doesn't seem like he's trying to have a discussion.
No.
This guy was trying to be a bigot for likes, I guess. I don't know. I really don't know what you're trying to achieve with something like this, other than what's happening now, I guess. So to answer your question, I mean, yes, I do think I'm not a big person on eliminating who can and can't talk on campuses, but I'm not black and white with it. I think there are does everybody deserve the right to have an opinion? Sure. But I'm also a person like there's certain, some opinions are just bad.
But who decides is the problem.
Well, society. It's unfortunately or fortunately, like we can all, because like it's the combination of the social contract thing right now. It's just like, will society eventually come for you? Maybe. And like, there's something that, this opens up, tons of other conversations we want to have here. But like, does what's acceptable now be unacceptable in 20 years mean that what you're saying now is bad in 20 years? Maybe it does. I don't know. It's something to consider. But like, I don't know. I mean,
it's tough. It's a tough.
It's tough. Well, it's tough. But the thing is, where I struggle with it is that I do tend to go with the college campuses are actually the one place that you should have those conversations,
right?
More so, which.
What is college there for, if not to expose you to new ideas, even if they're bad ideas, right?
Yeah, I mean, and you get plenty of bad ideas brought up in a conversation-based classroom and that kind of stuff. And I think it's just the problem is that I think it's less even about the bad idea, an idea being good or bad, quote unquote, and whether it should be engaged with. And I think the problem is that a lot of people. And I'm generalizing as usual, but a lot of people who maybe would be giving these opinions of these kind of ideas, these Richard Spencers of the world, these Milo
Yiannopoulos.
Thank you. Almost more about it is about, I don't even know if they fully believe their opinions. They're just trying to be this incendiary person. Almost like their idea is to fight PC culture and more so, and then they're just going to say stuff that's not even necessarily what they actually believe or what they care about. And it's more the theatrics of these ideas diminishes my feeling that it further invalidates their opinions. And I think I don't know if that really made sense what I'm trying to say there, but like the way these ideas are presented are so intentionally, aggressively.
But isn't that a logical fallacy to not contend with the ideas themselves, but rather how they're presented?
Well, I mean, an idea. I mean, well, I don't know if I would agree with that because it's like an idea to be like when you and I if we're debating over a topic, if I'm, the whole point again of this conversation and this podcast and this thing was to try to get past all of those theatrics. Yeah. Get past that because as we both admitted, you don't have any real debate when there's such a distinct one. You're not coming in to have your mind changed or even to consider ways to change your mind with that kind of thing. You're more about I'm putting on my play or I'm putting on my performance piece based upon my idea, and I'm going to be a firebrand. I'm going to be something like that. So do those things get muddled together? Absolutely. And that's the problem is, you can't engage and then like snuff out what maybe would be a bad idea because you're not even engaging with it. But that's because, again, you get associated with sounds bad, the type of person who typically would put forth these ideas in such a way. I don't know. It's because I'm conflicted on this. I'm big time conflicted on this as a liberal person because I truly do think some ideas are bad. And
I agree with you. I think some ideas are bad. And I think I mentioned this last week. The way you determine which idea is bad and which idea is good is by discussing them, I think.
Sure.
This is a particularly difficult topic, I think. But,
yeah.
So why don't we move on? We've been hitting this one for a while. We've got one other topic we want to get into here in part 2. So if you've been paying attention to what's going on in the entertainment world this week and really for the past, I would say maybe month, there are a lot of efforts to remove episodes from shows that contain blackface or the the assumption, I guess, of blackface that a character is basically darkened their complexion for some dramatic effect in the TV show. So The Office, Scrubs, 30 Rock. Some other ones I know are Community, which is my wife and I have recently gotten into on Netflix and enjoy. And then there's other things going on with, like, if you've seen Jimmy Fallon has come out and apologized for impersonating Chris Rock on Saturday Night Live about 20 years ago. And also Jimmy Kimmel for doing impersonations of Karl Malone and Oprah on The Man Show in the early 2000s. How do you feel about this, Sam, in terms of removing these episodes and just your general thoughts on this one?
Well, the interesting thing about it instantly is that it's all comedies. It's most of it's I don't know what the most recent thing that's on here is. I would guess probably 30 Rock based upon what I've seen, which I think was probably like late 2010 and 2000s, early 2010s. I feel like most stuff that's been having this kind of going back and removing these, I don't think there's very much that's happened recently. Though with that also, you could be talking to kind of tie in with this. There's also the situation where a lot of animated shows, again mainly comedies, but not only, are having they've had white actors and actresses playing people of color, or multiracial or anything like that, and a lot of them are stepping down from The Simpsons show, like BoJack Horseman.
Yeah, I saw that headline.
So it's interesting. I don't want to go too far into it because I feel like I've been dominating my rambling.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you jump in on it? But I think the first thing that came out to me is just like it's all comedies, which is just interesting to see, like, what, what's considered funny and whether or not in the moment if it's even considered funny and such. So and now that's going back, kind of changing that. But yeah, you start off with this.
Yeah, so let me again preface that we're two white guys discussing this. I don't know how seeing blackface makes a Black American feel. We're just open to talking. I want to talk about stuff, so just say that. My gut reaction is I don't really understand the point. I looked around the internet for some different discussion around this. Most of what I found, I went through several Reddit threads, and there were some people on there saying, I'm Black and I don't understand this, and I think the best point that I saw was this is largely missing the point of like a BLM protest. This isn't what we're asking for. This isn't what we're trying to accomplish, which I think is fair. There's another one here that the Golden Girls. So here's a picture. This is from 1988, I believe. Yeah. Of the folks. I think they're wearing mud. It's like I haven't seen the episode. I never watched the Golden Girls, but they're wearing like mud, like they're getting a facial. Yeah. And from what I read about this, it's in the episode they're sort of confronting racism. Actually, it's like they're using it in like a positive way. It seems to. I actually haven't seen it, so don't hold me on that one. The one that I think I had the biggest reaction to was Community, just because that's been. My wife and I have been watching that on Netflix, and we actually had just seen the episode that they pulled, which I think it's from season 2. In the episode, they're playing. It's called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, I think, and they're playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's like a tabletop game. Sometimes people like dress up for it. In the episode, the actor Ken Jeong, who is known for his roles in The Hangover, he's a comedian. Yeah. He's a Korean by ancestry. So he's a Korean man. In the show, he's playing a Chinese man. So it's a Korean playing a Chinese man. And then in this episode, he dresses up as a dark elf, which is a fictional kind of creature in the Dungeons and Dragons world. And he like darkens his skin because he's like in character. And the most interesting thing is in the episode, the other characters call him racist. They call him out for it. And so I guess in some cases I'm a little confused why we need to censor an episode where a Korean man playing a Chinese man playing a fictional character of a dark elf. Why does this need to be censored again? So I don't really understand, admittedly. I think this is one of those more on the feel good side. We're doing something that we think makes us feel good, and that it's not actually affecting anything. It's also related. I don't know if you saw maybe a month ago or something. Is it HBO pulled Gone with the Wind from its rotation, and then they put it back up with like a historical context or something, like a blurb about it at the beginning.
No, I didn't see that part, but yeah.
To me, that's much more appropriate. Like, I don't know. I don't think you should get rid of the media. If anything, I think you should, put your disclaimer on it or whatever else, but it's sort of a snapshot in time. And I think the last point I'll make is when we talk, I did some investigation here because I actually didn't, I wanted to learn more about blackface and what it meant and where it came from. And from what I found, it was born out of 19th century minstrel shows. Mm-hmm. So these were white actors doing these traveling minstrel shows where they would, literally darken their face with makeup to negatively portray African Americans, kind of mocking them, like just playing the character in a light that is meant to, you're supposed to make fun of them. And so that seems to be the historical context as far as I can tell. I haven't seen all of these references, but of the ones I have seen, that doesn't seem to be the case. Or it doesn't seem to be the case that anyone is being mocked. And in many cases, they're sort of being called out for, hey, like, you can't do that kind of thing. That's kind of my take.
So, I mean, yes, yeah, definitely. I'm glad you brought that part up. It's, to me, again, I agree with a lot of what you said, especially the general feeling. Again, I'm not one to speak for the Black Lives Matter movement, but it definitely feels a little bit like a superficial response to the larger situation. And I'm not saying superficial responses aren't beneficial. I think this is a big thing having to do with representation. And that's, again, it's that image, whether intentionally or not, and whether you're commenting on it or not, still comes back to bringing back in that image of the old minstrel shows. Like like the Sambo dolls and such, which is again the blackface look with the big giant red mouth. And, kind of the extreme stereotype. Extremely racist stereotype, I should say. And so I think I can understand the viewpoint of wanting to remove negative representations, even if the show or movie or whatever is is even stating that, like, this is not meant as a negative representation. This is us to point out that this is something that people, the kind of pointing out the inherent racism that still occurs in people, thinking that this is okay and pointing out that it's not okay and that kind of thing. So, like, they're trying to make commentary, but I think it's one of those things that comes back to, and I'm, again, I don't know the writers' rooms very well, but I know based upon statistics, writers' rooms on the whole are pretty not diverse, are pretty standardly white. So it's just, again, it's just like, I think a lot of it has to do with, like, who's making these decisions to show these types of representation, even if they're commenting on a way that they feel is appropriate. Comedy's tough because, you go back and forth with, what's allowed and what's not allowed with comedy. There's lots of people who think that anything's free game with comedy. And, the tough part is that, like, sometimes that non-PC comedy can, makes you laugh. And then you're like, okay, like, I enjoyed that that tickled me. What about me did that tickle me for? That kind of thing, makes you think about it that way. But it's, I think I have less concern about it to be like, it just going away, being like, why are we removing this? Because in the grand scheme of things, it's like, it's a single episode of a lot of shows or that sort of thing, I'm not overly concerned about it. I'm more of a viewpoint of just like, it feels like it's missing the forest for the trees a little bit in the purpose of what should be a focus right now. Again, that's from my perspective. I'm not the one who has to see something that can be, associated with negative representation of myself. Right. It's actually really interesting. I don't know if you know this. This kind of ties in a little bit. As a proud Dutchman, there is the Santa Claus out there is Sinterklaas, and he has the Black Peters is what they're called. I don't know if you've ever heard of any of this.
Not familiar with that.
Okay, so the Black Peters are basically his elves, and they are actually little tiny, African people that he like basically kidnapped and make works for him. And every year, and again, my gosh, the Dutch part of my family is going to scream at me for misrepresenting that, not stating it perfectly. I'm not going to go into the full story of Sinterklaas, but a big part of it though is that they come and they help him. They help Santa Claus, say Sinterklaas, say who's good and who's bad, but what they put coal in your shoe or any of the kind of stuff. But they would have these parades similar to how you would have the, Santa Claus, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade where Santa Claus would come down. Sinterklaas usually would come at the beginning of December. I don't know the exact date. Again, the Dutch part of me hates me, but it would involve these lily white Dutch people in full blackface. And I'm talking not just like the little circle blackface like you're seeing in the photo over to the Golden Girls with the mud. I'm talking like as if you painted every inch, kind of more similar to, I've seen the photo of Ken Jeong in that where he's just black. He is all black.
Yeah, I can probably pull it up while you're talking.
So it's one of these things where now, like recently, that has become, obviously, for some pretty obvious reasons, a pretty hot button topic because it is a historical festivity having to do with Christmas, which, as the war on Christmas here in America, like it's a very people defend it. While you're doing it, look up Black Peters. Why don't you do that while you're on that too? And it's it's a very interesting thing out in Holland right now, which is again a very liberal country, but is going through a lot of strife having to do with kind of like multiculturalism and they are a colonizing country. They're very involved in the slave trade and such, and they have these characters who'd come out and there they are, Black Peters, would come out every year, and it's the tried and true tradition of Zwarte Piet, and it's a big hot button topic out there with people being like, yeah, but this is tradition. This is tradition. Like, what does the history of something mean? And again, this can lead into other conversations we're going to have down the line. But like, does the fact that something is tradition make it not racist?
Yeah.
I would say no. It's just like, it's really impossible to look at that photo right there and not go, that's probably pretty racist.
They even sort of look like minstrels.
It's a very interesting thing because, like you said, they have the red lips there. If you go into other ones, it gets worse. So it's just this, like, especially with Holland. I mean, the Dutch have such a tied. They're big time slave traders. They are more so than, I don't know if they've officially moved the most bodies across the ocean, but they contributed to the Black diaspora more than just about any country. And like, they're still in 2020 walking around in blackface and going, well, what's the big deal? So I think with all that stuff that's still tied in, that during these bits of entertainment, these shows, these parts of our like recent history, it's just like, maybe it is okay just to let that stuff go. Just let it disappear. Will we be worse off because those episodes are out of the catalog? I don't know. And, and maybe it's a superficial thing. Maybe they need to be more focused on things in the bigger picture that are for life and death, but like improving representation in that kind of regard, it only makes people who have to live with that negative stuff, their lives a little bit easier. And thus, and it's like, who does it? Am I going to be hurt by it? No. Does it make their life better? If it does, it's probably worth it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm going on tangents. But,
it's okay.
When I saw this, I instantly thought of this history with Svarte Pete and such. And
yeah, I've never heard of that, so thanks for letting me know. That's an interesting take on it. So, are you familiar with Chappelle's show? You know Dave Chappelle? So he did 2 seasons of Chappelle's Show in the early 2000s. I was in, I think, my senior year of high school when it came out, and me and my friends were huge fans of it. So it's like a sketch comedy show, and in the show, I'll pull up this picture, Dave Chappelle does whiteface, right? So he like pretends to be a white person, and I think it's hilarious personally. So, I mean, I don't understand what it's like to be a black person and see blackface, but I do know what it's like to be a white person to see whiteface. I personally am not bothered by it. I thought it was funny, but just to try to make the strongest case I can in the other direction, there isn't a negative historical connotation with whiteface, like the minstrel show we were just talking about.
Correct.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting. And Dave Chappelle in particular, I think he's a absolutely genius stand-up comic. I really enjoy his stuff. He had a special super recently called 846 where he talked about George Floyd even. It's not really a stand-up comedy special. There's a few jokes in there, but he talks about like pretty serious stuff. So it's so interesting because I've seen a lot of conservatives sort of lambast him in some ways because he draws some conclusions that they don't agree with. But if you recall, about a year ago, Dave Chappelle put out a Netflix special called Sticks and Stones that was overwhelmingly raked over the coals by the media, by critics, because he made some jokes about Jussie Smollett and also about trans people, if I recall. Like there was these news stories about it, like on Rotten Tomatoes, it had like a 0 or 3% critic score, but it had like 100% user score. You can do the different ones. And you had exactly the opposite side of what happened with the 846, where you have like the left kind of denouncing him and the right being like, hey, like he's championing, whatever, free speech, comedy. And then it sort of switched now. So to me, he's a really interesting figure that has kind of stirred up controversy on both sides. But you said earlier about PC comedy and like, are there any limits? I don't know. I'm not sure I'm qualified to make that distinction. I don't know if there are limits. I think comedy is, it's sort of kind of harkens back to that court jester in medieval times, where like the jester was the only person who could make fun of the king, and he had some sort of special immunity in that regard. So I certainly don't want to censor comedians and tell them what they can and cannot say. But Dave Chappelle's an interesting example to me.
Yeah. No, it's the whole it's interesting because I feel like, especially over the past decade or so, it's comedians always felt like they kind of got a free pass because of that whole like anything is comedy, as long as it's comedy, it's okay. Yeah. The whole point is that it's like tongue in cheek, even if deep down you think they actually believe what they're saying or anything like that. But it's been interesting to see. There's been a lot of lashback at comedians kind of, it's, whether it's through the Me Too movement, there's been a lot of stuff with that, or more about, having to do now also with stuff with racism or like what their opinions actually mean, or you think of like a show, obviously a show like South Park or something like that, that's just like sole purpose is just to like push the boundaries. Yeah. But then there's a certain point when you go, okay, you're pushing these boundaries so much that it's obvious that you're actually now, you're showing who you really are. And like, do you get to be critiqued upon that, or do you get this pass from it? It's tough. I want to be able to say that you can have these kind of conversations and laugh about these kind of things, because I think it'll make, it's good to be able to laugh about stuff. But it's also, again, like, there's not a lot you can really, I haven't come from a background where there's a lot of like, where I've had to like deal with something on a day-to-day basis or live with that or see myself represented in a way that's not appealing or anything like that. So yeah, it's just tough. It's just that moment of being like, you want to have your cake and eat it too, but then realizing that it's just not, you can't really do that. Like I come back to that point all the time where it's just like, it doesn't affect me, but like, is this worth me, is some sacrifices on what I thought was part of my day-to-day life 10 years ago or something like that I really enjoyed or took for granted? Does it really matter if I'm finding out that like that aspect of it, which is really not important to me, really affected somebody in a negative way?
Yeah. To reinforce your point, a few years ago, Michael Richards, who played Kramer on Seinfeld, had like a really bad stand-up episode where he was like dropping the N-word a bunch, and it was on video. And I mean, I think he's pretty much like gone from comedy as far as I know, anyway. So I mean that sort of reinforces what you're saying, that I mean, maybe there is a limit,
Yeah, it's and again, it's just what it is. It's just like, I think for one reason or another, comedy's kind of been able to kind of work outside of whatever the social norms at that point, as an idea of being like, this is commentary, and like, by bringing out the absurdity of this and bringing out these things and putting it into the forefront, we can get away with this a little bit more. I think it's I think certain people have to have the proper cachet to get away with that kind of thing, and I don't know. It's fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, depending how you fall in this, it's times change, and like right now, that kind of stuff is not flying back, and things are being relitigated, and whether it's fair is to be discussed, but it is where we are right now, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how the adjustments occur with comedy, in particular, but just social discourse in general, from it all comes back to just like how, the kind of speech you can make, and whether or not, why are you making that speech? Are you actually trying to like shine a light on something, or are you just being a dick? Right. I think is a big part of it. And I think a lot of times people who are just being dicks got passes because of the fact that some people are making social commentary, whether it's like a George Carlin or somebody like that, who's legitimately, is coming from a place of commentary. And then there's other people who are just being a jerk and riding those waves. I think now people aren't getting that benefit of the doubt anymore. And maybe that's a good thing, but it's definitely a different thing.
Yeah. So let me raise one more related point, and then maybe we'll wrap it up.
You do it, dude.
I'm sort of the opinion that, you can appreciate the art, but not the artist type of deal, like, sure. So if I listen to what Michael Richards has to say in this terrible stand-up take that he had, that doesn't mean that I can't enjoy his performance on Seinfeld from 30 years ago. And I sort of take that approach in a lot of parts of life, whether maybe I disagree with Bono politically, but does that mean I can't listen to U2? I'm curious, what do you think about, is that kind of an appropriate way to think about things, or what do you think about that?
So this has been, just to give a real life example, I had my wedding last September, and the topic of whether or not you're allowed to play Michael Jackson anymore came up.
Really?
And because we spoke to our DJ, and DJ's like, Michael Jackson's off limits.
Wow.
He's like, I can play Jackson 5, but MJ, it's right now it's no good. And
because of racism connotations, or from like his child molestation?
Yeah, correct.
Gotcha.
But just following along those lines of what you're saying, it's just like, it's a party, at a wedding, it's just like, oh, you got to play some Michael Jackson. People are going to have a great time and dance and enjoy it. But it's just like, okay, but right now, how much do you separate the artist from the art? And I think this is somewhere where I, typically more liberal people would fall more on no, you can't separate the artist from the art. Well, I don't want to say that's a liberal thing. That's the wrong way to go about it. But I'm of a person who can separate the art from the artist, or choose to, typically. I can appreciate, I'm more of a believer of when the art has been created, it's now out in the ether and it belongs to everybody in some regard, and it's less involved in who the person is. Can I understand the viewpoint of not removing the art from the artist? Absolutely. I can get it. I get it. It's, if you're a Jewish person, you can't listen to Wagner because he was a Nazi.
Right.
I understand that. You know, it's just things like that. It's just tough. Like I, you know, it's again, it comes from the point of privilege of not ever having to think about it from that viewpoint of being like, I've never truly had to have something in my life that makes me have this negative, you know, emotion that associates me with, like, if I think of this artist and what they did in their personal life and how that affected, you know, how that makes me feel. So, you know, I'm lucky in that regard. So that's just a true, I'm not really putting a social judgment on it either way. I'm just speaking truly from just who I am. It's, I don't really attribute them as the same thing. I kind of go, once it's out there, it's out there. I can appreciate and critique the art for what it is and not really have much to say about who the artist is for it. And I'm not a creator. I don't make art. So I'm sure some artists would want me to think that. And I'm sure some artists would tell me to go screw myself because they are the art, or the art is them, etc. So it's just a pure, I haven't thought enough about it to make a judgment on that. But that's just purely where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a good discussion to get into as well as it relates to like the cancel culture narrative. You know, if you're in Hollywood or something and we deem you kind of unworthy, not only are you not an okay person, but we need to now boycott all of your past works, or you know, we can't buy your comedy special DVD or whatever, you know, whatever it is. So I think I generally agree with you that. You know, you can sort of separate the art from the artist, but I also, you know, I think it's the individual also has the right to say, you know what, I'm offended by this and I don't like it. And one of the things Dave Chappelle said in the Sticks and Stones special is, if I offend you and there's something I say you don't like, just remember you clicked on my face. Like, you can turn it off, you know, you don't have to subject yourself to that. So I think that's an important piece to consider. But yeah, as always, Sam, there's a million different roads we could take this. So we'll just have to maybe save some for next time.
I guess we'll have to try.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us, folks. We are going to call it right there. And I guess we'll try to come up with another weekly special, perhaps. In a week, but please, I really implore you, if this is engaging at all, please reach out. Please comment on the YouTube post or on Facebook, or, you know, subscribe, whatever you want to do. I'm really interested in having these conversations, and obviously between the two parts that we did today, we talked about some really difficult subjects. Honestly, things I do not talk about with anybody ever. I do not dare get into these kind of details, but I really want to be a person who is able to speak about them. So just want to thank you again, Sam, for joining me on this. And
thank you as always, Zach.
Let's keep it going, I suppose.
I'll do my best to try to, you know, edit myself these coming podcasts. It just gets going, man. But yeah, it was a pleasure as always.
All right, buddy. Well, until next week, guys, hope to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll speak to you later.
Toodles.